You know that feeling? The one where managing your money just feels like this impossible uphill battle? Well, you are definitely not alone. It's like we're all playing a game, but the rules keep changing on us. So, we're going to dive into why that feeling is so incredibly common, and more importantly, look at some modern strategies that actually work. Okay, let's just start with a number that's kind of staggering. A 2024 report found that a massive 62% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now. Think about that. For most people, their entire income is just gone by the end of the month. There's no room for savings, no buffer for unexpected costs. And hey, before you think, oh, that's a low income problem, get this. A full 40% of people earning over $100,000 a year are in the exact same boat. This isn't just about not earning enough money. There's clearly something much deeper going on with the financial pressures we're all facing. And to make things even crazier, we're all leaning on debt to try and bridge that gap. As of 2024, households in the US are carrying, wait for it, a record-breaking $1.14 trillion in credit card debt. That is just a mountain of high-interest payments weighing down millions and millions of families. So, when you see numbers like that, it's really easy to feel stressed out, right? Maybe even a little ashamed. But here's the most important thing I want you to hear. This is a super common experience. Feeling financially stretched to the absolute limit, that's basically become the new normal for so many people.
Which, of course, brings us to the big question, right? Why is managing money so unbelievably hard? If so many of us are struggling, is it really just a personal failure, a lack of willpower? Or is there something bigger at play here? We're going to look at the system, the history, and even our own brains to figure this out.
So, right off the bat, let me just say this. The modern money problem, it's not you, it's the system. That constant financial stress you might be feeling, that is not a personal failing. It's actually a pretty rational response to a system that's become incredibly difficult to navigate. Let's break down just how fragile things have gotten. Okay, get this. The Federal Reserve found that almost 40% of adults can't even cover a simple $400 emergency, like a car repair, without having to borrow money. At the exact same time, the personal savings rate in the US has just plummeted to 3.4%. Historically, that number was more like 8 to 10%. So here's the big mindset shift we need. Budgeting is a skill. It's not some moral test that you pass or fail. A huge part of the problem is that so much of the financial advice we hear is, well, it's old. It's based on rules from a totally different era. So let's talk about why those old rules just don't work anymore. I mean, take a look at this timeline. The whole concept of pay yourself first, that's from 1926. It's almost 100 years old. And the super famous 50-30-20 rule, that was cooked up back in 2005. I mean, economically speaking, that was a lifetime ago. This was before the huge housing crisis, before student debt exploded, and way before the inflation spike we've all been feeling. And this really puts it all in perspective. Back in 2005, when that rule was made, student debt was only a quarter of what it is today. Housing was way more affordable. The idea that you could keep your needs to just 50% of your income, for a lot of people today, that's just a fantasy. I mean, rent alone can eat up 35 to 50% of your paycheck in big cities. The game has completely, fundamentally changed. Okay, but it's not just the economy that's making things tough. To really get why budgeting is so hard, we actually have to look inside our own heads. It turns out there are some really powerful psychological forces that are pretty much always working against our best intentions. First up, there's this thing called present bias, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's that powerful gut feeling that a reward today is way better than a much bigger reward way off in the future. That feeling that buying a coffee right now is better than saving that $5 for a retirement that's like 40 years away? Yep, that's present bias. It's basically an ancient survival instinct, and it makes saving for the long term feel, well, totally unnatural. And then there's its evil twin, loss aversion. This one's wild. Psychologically, losing $100 feels about twice as painful as the joy you get from gaining $100. So when you try to cut something from your budget, your brain doesn't see it as a smart financial move. It sees it as a painful loss, and it makes you resist, even when you know the long-term gain is worth it. All right, so the old rules are broken, and our brains are literally wired to work against us. I know, it sounds pretty hopeless, right? But it's not. This is where we get to the good part. We're going to look at 3 modern budgeting philosophies that are actually designed for the world we live in today. They work with our psychology, not against it. So here's the quick rundown. First, there's pay yourself first, which is perfect if you just want simplicity and hate tracking every penny. Then you've got zero-based budgeting, which is for people who need maximum control, especially if you're trying to crush some debt. And finally, there's values-based budgeting, which is a game changer for anyone who feels totally restricted by normal budgets. Let's break down how they each work. So, pay yourself first. This is sometimes called reverse budgeting, and it's awesome because it's so simple. First, you just set your savings goal, let's say 15% of your income. Then you put it on autopilot. The second your paycheck lands, you have automatic transfers set up to whisk that 15% away to your savings and investment accounts. Then your bills get paid automatically, and whatever is left over in your checking account, that's yours to spend, completely guilt-free. No tracking, no spreadsheets, you just live your life. All right, now zero-based budgeting is kind of the polar opposite. This is for the person who wants total, absolute control over their money. You list your total monthly income, then you list all of your expenses, your savings goals, your debt payments, everything. And you assign every single dollar of your income to one of those categories until your final formula is income minus expenses equals zero. Yeah, it's meticulous. It definitely requires tracking. But if you want to demolish debt and know exactly where every single cent is going, it's unbelievably powerful. And last but not least, we have values-based budgeting. This approach just flips the whole idea of a restrictive budget on its head. The very first step isn't about cutting costs. It's about identifying what you truly love spending money on. Is it travel, dining out, hobbies? Then you find all the stuff you're spending money on that brings you zero joy, and you cut those things mercilessly. This frees up a ton of cash for you to spend lavishly and guilt-free on the stuff that actually makes you happy. Okay, so that's three really different systems, right? And look, the best one isn't the one that's most correct on paper. It's the one you'll actually stick with. So let's figure out which one might be the right place for you to start. The whole key here is to match the system to your personality. It's pretty simple. If you crave simplicity and the idea of tracking every coffee just gives you anxiety, then you should try pay yourself first. If you're in a serious battle with debt and you need a precise, powerful plan of attack, then zero-based budgeting is your weapon. And if you've tried every budget out there and they all just make you feel deprived and miserable, please give values-based budgeting a shot. It can totally change your relationship with money. And I want to leave you with this thought, summed up perfectly in a quote by Ramit Sethi, who's really a champion of this values-based idea. Spend extravagantly on what you love and cut costs mercilessly on what you don't. That really is the modern philosophy of money. It's not about restriction. It's about consciously designing a life you love by putting your money toward what actually matters to you. And that is a game you can absolutely win.